We are going to get started. I like to start promptly. So I'm assuming that everybody can hear me. Um, so I have a question for those of you who were here the last time. I threw a lot of information at you, and I was just curious, did anybody walk away and go, I missed something, or I didn't understand this, or I have questions about stuff. Um, I would like to hear what your thoughts are, or if you have any questions, or was everything perfectly clear and you're all set to go? You're looking forward to the slides? Yeah, I will get them to you. Hold on, I'm reading the notes. Um, let's see. Okay. So the PowerPoints are gonna help you. Um, oh, you would prefer to have the slides in advance. Um, the next time we do this, we'll get the slides out in advance. The reason why we don't always send out the slides in advance is because a lot of times people get the slides and decide not to attend. Um, and we just want to make sure that everybody here um, is on the same page. This is my first go at this, so I am learning. I see there's another one on the 2nd and 3rd of March. Can I take that one as well? The one on the 2nd and 3rd of March, I believe, was the IPS model. Um, was for employment. So of course you can take that one if you would like. Um, I don't think that um that's going to be a problem. And yes, you can. We can make sure you get the a copy of the audio since this is being recorded. We can make sure you get that as well. So you're going to get everything I promise you will definitely get in an email. Um, and if you have any questions, you'll be able to go back and ask some questions. So let me ask this question. How do people feel about the scoring? You feel like you have a good sense of how each dimension gets scored, or is that still not crystal clear? Okay, so you didn't understand the scoring. Um, okay, all right. Well, we're gonna keep talking about scoring. Um, all right. So we're gonna talk. Okay, so dimension one. Everybody remembers. Dimension one is choice of housing, right? So, um, basically, choice of housing is the person who you're working with should get to choose where they're going to live. So you have to show choice in a file, or in somehow you're going to have to show that you're giving people choice. One of the things I'm going to ask Kimberly or Amanda will send you out a link to a site that has a lot of forms in there, and some of the forms in this link will show you um, it will show you how to document choice. There, people have already developed forms. Um, so we'll make sure that you are able to get access to those forms because a lot of times what happens is you're giving people choice, and if if you're giving people choice but you're not documenting it, your score is going to go down, and it's going to go down because you're not documenting. So it becomes really important to make sure you're documenting well. Most times when people don't get a perfect score, it's has a lot to do with um the fact that um people aren't documenting well. And I'm having somebody saying that they can't hear me. Um and I just want to make sure that people can hear me. And if people can hear me, then this person's maybe having some issues with their system. So okay, I'm hearing that people can hear me. So whoever's having issues, you may want to hang up and come back to the meeting. I apologize. So we want to see whether or not people are getting choice. You can get two choices or three scores on housing. You could get a 1, which means you're not doing this. Um, you can get a 2.5, which means you're giving people limited choice. You're not giving them full choice. Or they can get a 4, which means you're giving full choice. One of the things for me, this slide is good, but um it I don't know. It doesn't I don't necessarily think it gives me as much information as the scoring sheet. And I'm looking for the scoring sheet now because I think the scoring sheet um makes this easier to understand, and you don't have to try to sit there and figure out stuff. So back to this scoring sheet. I'm assuming everybody can still see this. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. Um, and oops, maybe that might have been okay. That's a good size. This is your best bet when it comes to scoring. Um, so when you're scoring, or when you're looking at your programs, I would recommend keeping when you get this in your email, I would print out a copy and keep this close by, because this is going to tell you everything you need to do to score. And if you look at, I'm going to just go back up to the top to show you just a few more things on here. Um, But if you look at housing choice, it tells you that the person has a choice of the type of housing. But even better than that form, to me, is this one right here, down here on the it's on the same form, but it goes into it a little bit differently. So if you look at your programs, and you look at this first form, let's look at Dimension 1 choice of housing. So e- every person that comes into your program, when you look at them and when you're documenting and when you're working with them, you should be thinking, okay, choice. Am I giving people full range of choices? Remember what I said on Monday is that even when choices are not available now, that doesn't mean you take them off the table. That means you still give people all of the information. So if there is an affordable option, where people um the wait list is open, but you know it's going to take a while before people come up on that wait list. Our job is to still give people that information to let them know that there's an affordable option, but there's a wait list. We can get your name on that wait list. We should be explaining that to them and letting them know that that choice is available, but it might not be available now. When you start to limit the choices because you're making the decision about this is not the best place for this person, or you're saying to yourself, well, this option is really not available, and so I'm not going to tell them about it. Our job is not to make any decisions like that. Our job is to put everything on the table, including an affordable housing unit. And everybody out there is going to be thinking, why would I put an affordable housing option on the table when this person has no income and has and needs housing now, and um they came in and they want affordable housing. Well, you put a, a market rate apartment, or an apartment that costs, market rate, that doesn't have subsidies. You put that on the table. You always put it on the table, and you say to the person, this is another option. This unit, or these apartments will range in the price range from, I don't know, 600 to $22,000. If you want a regular apartment with a landlord, that's how much it's going to cost. And the person's going to say, well, I don't know if I can afford that. And this is where you would say to the person, well, if that's one of the options, that if that's the option that you want, the way that you can get that option is by getting a job. And if you're interested in working, I can make a referral to you to our employment program, or to an employment program that I know of that's doing some great work. You see how I'm not taking an option off the table based on what I believe. Because a lot of times we see people and we think, oh, we got to put them in affordable housing. We got to find an affordable place for them. And we don't put the regular options on the table. When you don't put the regular options on the table, it means that you're limiting choice for people. So it's important to put all of the options on the table. Does everybody understand that? Does that make sense to you? Because if you put all the options on the table, people can think about stuff. That one person who I tell about this market rate apartment, I've had people see a market rate apartment where it's full price, and they fell in love with it. And that's what they wanted. And they were willing to do what it took to get that place. And so some people, I've had people get jobs because they wanted to get an apartment on their own. So we really have to put everything on the table and let the person make the choice. If we can't put everything on the table, then that's going to limit our score, and it's also going to limit the growth that we give, or that we can, that people can achieve. We're already making decisions. Um, so it's important to put everything on the table. If you remember nothing else about choice, remember that, because we always tend to do that. We tend to say, well, there are these great programs, but there's a wait list. And this person came to me because they need housing now, and I'm only going to look at things I can put them in right now, and we do a disservice to that person. We don't give them all the options, because what will happen later is this person will find out other things that other people got, because people talk and they will wonder why weren't they given that option, or they might think, well, if I was given that option, I might have been interested in it. We also need to put on the table market rate apartments and also put the possibility of a roommate on the table. And people may turn that down, but we still owe it to them to put it on the table and to say something like, okay, this is a market rate apartment. You're on a fixed income, but if you got a roommate, you could probably afford this, and and have a roommate pay the other portion. And they may say, well, I don't know anybody who I want to be roommates with. And you can say, well, if you are interested, I have other people on my caseload. I can talk to some of them. Did you have any preferences around roommates? And if you're really interested in having a roommate, we can help you to make this work, because we if we can help you do a roommate agreement. Basically, where you and your roommate have certain rules that you have to follow in order to make the household work well. See how I'm not taking options off the table because they're going to make things more difficult. I'm putting all the options on the table, and I'm going to let the person, that tenant or potential tenant, make the option. The other one that is important is this is, if you have your buildings, for those people who have, or agencies who have their own housing, do you have an option, or is there a possibility to let people see multiple units in that building? Um, and that's not always possible. I know, when once people start moving into the building, the options are gone. But we should, if there are multiple units available, we should let people know and see those multiple units. So for agencies who are doing their own housing, one of the ways that you can try to improve your score is by letting the people choose among multiple units. That's if they're available. Or if you have multiple buildings, letting them choose among the buildings. Um, the 1.1C is mainly about people not losing their priorities in play, or losing their place in line. We don't want to punish people because we showed them an apartment, um, and they said they didn't want it. Sometimes staff take that personal and think this person should be grateful for any apartment they can get. It's better than being homeless. I'm sure you're right. It's better than being homeless, but at the same time, um, we want people to stay in their apartments, right? We don't want people to move into an apartment and within a month they're moving, or within 2 months they're being evicted. The research shows us that when people have a say in where they're living, when they make their choice, they're going to do better in that unit, and they're going to be more likely to try to maintain that unit. So we want to make sure that we don't punish people when they don't choose a place. We still keep working with them until they find a place that they want to live in. I've had people turn down unit after unit, and it gets to the point, it gets to be a little tedious. But what I did was I kept working with the person, and I kept saying, okay, we're doing this together. I'm not doing everything. You're going to also be looking for places, and I'm going to be looking for places. And when we come back together next week, or in a couple of days, whenever our next appointment is, you will show me the places that you've been thinking about, and I'll show you the places that I found, and See if any of those work for you. Um, Now with the choice in living arrangements, that's one of the things you have to be clear about, and one of the things you need to think about when you're thinking about choice of living arrangements. Now, there are going to be some times where people are making a choice and it's going to impact other choices. So, for instance, you have a person who wants housing. You say, do you want to live by yourself or do you want to live with somebody? They tell you they want to live with somebody. They got a boyfriend or a girlfriend or some significant other or some partner or some person. Well, that may affect where they can live, right? Some places you can't have a roommate, or some places you can't um you know two people aren't it won't hold two people. There's some small studios that just are too small. There's also, if you're going to an Oxford house, you can't, I'm assuming you can't take your boyfriend or girlfriend there because you're in a community living situation. Um, if you go into some Section 8 housing or some subsidized housing, there are rules on that as well. And one of the rules may be that everybody who moves into this unit has to qualify for that unit. And if this significant other doesn't qualify, then they can't move into that unit. That is information we give the potential tenant. We let them know, okay, I heard you. You can have this boyfriend or girlfriend move in with you, but that's going to affect some of the choices that we just went over. And here's some of here are the choices that it will affect. Now, if your boyfriend or girlfriend qualifies for a subsidy in housing, then that's going to be easier. We can talk about that. But if they're not going to qualify for a subsidy, then we're going to have to find you a market rate unit. And that market rate unit's going to be costing more. Um, but your boyfriend or girlfriend can live with you. Am I making sense, or am I just c- totally confusing you? Okay, thank you, Angie. I'm glad I'm making sense. Um, it's important that we make sure that people understand that. And a lot of times we don't talk to our clients that way. We don't give them all of the information because we think we're trying to not overwhelm them, or two, we're short on time and we're trying to just get through everything as quickly as possible. But this information and what I'm telling you about choice is going to make a big difference. And if you do your due diligence up in the front on choice, then um this could make your life a lot easier when it comes to that person maintaining their housing. Um, I got a question. How do you handle single parents um, with buildings that cannot accept minors? Does that affect the scoring? Um, so you got single parents and they want to move into a place and the place doesn't accept minors. Um, Well, we need to make sure that this place is legally not accepting minors. So if it's like an Oxford house, um, I can see how, you can't move into that, but um, it won't affect the scoring because that's something you really have no control over, and you need to be communicating with that single parent about, certain buildings that don't accept minors. And if these buildings are not accepting minors, if they're legally not accepting minors, we tell that to the person and they get to make an informed choice. Um, and if they're insisting on moving into this place that doesn't accept minors, we need to try to make sure that this not accepting minors is legal. And if it's legal, we can't do anything about it. And we just need to let the tenant or the person know that. And then they make that decision. All right. So that's the most important thing about the choice is giving people full choice and letting them make decisions that are going to work for them. Um, even even if we don't agree with that decision, there are times that we have to find housing or help somebody find housing, and they want something that is unreasonable. I'll give you an example. When I first wanted to buy my first house, I met with my real estate agent and I said I wanted a house. And his response was, "Great. Let's find you a house." And he said, "What are you looking for in this place?" I told him I wanted the two-car garage. I wanted the place to have a full finished basement. I wanted um two bedrooms, preferably three bedrooms. I wanted an open layout. I wanted, oh man, I had a list. And he never said no. He knew already how much my income was, but he didn't say no. What he did was he took me out to show me a place that fit my qualifications. And I was like, wow, I love this place. And then I said, "How much is it?" And he told me. And I was like, "Ha ha, I can't afford this." And then what did he do? He didn't say, "I knew you couldn't afford this." He said, "Well, let's talk about this place. What do you like about it?" And I told him the things I really liked about the place. And he said, "What do you have to have? Like, now that you have a sense of how much this place costs, what do you have to have?" And I started going back and I thought, well, I don't really need a two-car garage since I only have one vehicle. So maybe just the garage is doable. And then I was like, well, in the basement, it doesn't have to be fully finished. It could be partially finished. But I do want a basement. I started making my own changes because what I was seeing was that what I wanted, I couldn't afford. He never said to me, "You can't afford this, Pat." I came to that my own decision when I saw the price. And that was crucial that it was like he didn't say anything. If he had said you can't afford this, I might have been, upset with him, but he just and instead of saying, "Well, Pet, I don't know why you want to look at that. You know that's going to cost more than what you can afford." He just took me out there and started showing me places. And I started making decisions about, oh, I can't afford this. Um, I had given him a location that I wanted to live in. Well, I found out the location of where I wanted to live, houses were more expensive. So I changed that and I opened up my areas that I was willing to look at. Basically, you should be looking at yourself as a not a property manager, but a real estate manager or a real estate agent. They don't tell you what you can and cannot do. They help you to find and make that decision and figure out what you can afford and what you can do. And uh, they work with you on what it is that you want. I know a lot of you who've been doing this for a while, I'm sure have had people when you ask them what did they want for or where did they want to live. I'm sure you've had some people that says, I want a house. I want my own house. And I want this to be with it and I want that and I want this, and you're sitting there going, this person has no income and they came in here and asked for everything. They're unrealistic. Well, we're all unrealistic and we all start off with what our ideals are. Then the next step is to move from your ideals to your needs and your wants and your must-haves. Did I need to have a two-car garage? No, I didn't. Did I need to have a full um finished basement? Not really. I mean, it would have been nice. I would have loved it, but I couldn't afford it. So I had to make some decisions. I like that. Rise says it's working from my ideal to what I can actually get. This sounds like dating. Absolutely, it is. This is the same thing. You're going to start off with people with what their ideals, and you don't say you can't get that. You say, well, let's take a look at it. And when they take a look at it and figure out they can't afford it, or figure out that, oh, if I want this, I'm going to have to do some things different. Now, I've had some people say, oh, I really like this and I really want this, and I'm going to work to get this. Like, this is my goal. This is what I want to work towards. That's what we want, right? People, we want people to work towards stuff. We want them to actually not just be willing to accept what is, but to have some goals and some wishes. Um, so that's the thing with choice, the functional separation of housing and services. For those who do not own their own properties, this is an easy one to get a four on. If you work with private landlords, you can easily get a four on this because you just have to keep your functions separate. And I'm sure a private landlord is not going to let you get involved in their property management. Where the struggle will be is for those agencies who have their own housing. And even with your own housing, you can get a four or something pretty close to a four if you make some changes in your system or if your system fits what this is about. And so the one thing that you will need to have if you have your own housing is you need to make sure that the property manager is doing only property management work. And in from what I know, property managers only really um, deal with the building issues. So if you don't pay your rent, if you don't keep your place clean and sanitary, if you have guests who are making too much noise, that's what property managers deal with. So if you have your own place and you're thinking, well, the way we're set up, we're never going to get a good score. We're going to always get a 1. You can change that and just make the housing and the services separate. The service providers have no authority to collect rents, enforce lease requirements, initiate evictions, etc. Um, so, eh, for those who have their own housing, if you take some of these steps, you can actually get a higher score than a 1. Um, And you might want to make some of these changes because it's going to be really difficult if you're not giving people choices from dimension 1 and dimension 2. you don't have any separation of services and housing. That means there's two dimensions that you didn't score well on. That's going to put you in your agency in a really difficult position when you start off this by, getting ones on the first two dimensions. So I just wanted to give you some options or some thoughts around how you can improve your score if you have your own housing. Clear so far? All right. So the next one is the decent, safe, and affordable housing. This dimension three, you scored this dimension for each person. Each person will get a score. So for every tenant who is paying 30% or less of their income for rent, that tenant gets a 4. If the tenant is paying 31 to 40% of their income for housing, that's a 3, and so on. And so you go through this list. So if you have 20 tenants, you're going to have 20 scores. And then you take all of those scores and you add them all up together. And then you divide those scores by 20 because that was the number of people. So whatever that score is, it's going to be less than a 4 because unless all people were a 4, if everybody in your program is making less than or paying less than 30% of their income or paying 30% or less, then you're going to get a 4. So if you had 20 people and all 20 are in affordable housing, you're going to get a 4. But if you have any tenants who are in paying more than 30% of their income, that's going to take your score, down a couple of notches. But that's okay because remember, people have choices. I've had people choose to live in more expensive places. I had one tenant who chose to live in a place and paid more than 50% of his income for rent. It was his choice. I tried my best to talk to him about the options and what he was doing, but I could not, that it wasn't my place to change his mind. Um, so that can affect your score. So again, those things are not going to make it. I wouldn't worry so much about when people do that. Again, I also wouldn't worry so much about the score. I think the more important thing in doing fidelity or doing permanent supportive housing is what is written with the score. So every time you get a fidelity review, what they do is they write down suggestions. So if it's not a 4, so on decent, safe, and affordable housing, if you don't get a 4, because some tenants choose to live in places that they have to pay more rent, not a big deal. It becomes a big deal if you have too many tenants in the 2 and 1 range. But if you have a few, no biggie. If everybody's in the 1 and 2 range, then that's going to say to whoever's doing the review is that you're not putting an affordable option on the table. And so you need to put an affordable option. So that's one of the things that they would probably write in your review. And that's what you need to be paying attention to, not so much the score. For the units that meet HQS, we talked about that. We talked about the fact that if it's subsidized unit, we assume that there's an HQS already, so you don't need to try to hold on to those HQSs. We'll just need to see the lease to make sure it's a subsidized unit, and we will assume that it had an HQS. If it's not a subsidized unit, you need to do your own form of an HQS, which is on that link again. And I think the link is Pathways. And what I'll do is have Amanda send you all information about how to get into that link, because that link has a lot of the paperwork that I've mentioned. It has the HQS inspection form in there. That is one that all staff can do. And so in everybody's file who is not in a subsidized unit, there should be some kind of HQS inspection paper there, so that we know that the place was inspected by somebody on staff and that they found it to be in good working shape. The housing integration piece, which is Dimension 4, that one, that's one of the reasons why we look at addresses. And what we're looking at is we want to have people um, dispersed through the community and not all in one place. But if you have your own building, then most people are going to be in your buildings. Again, nothing to worry about, if as long as you're getting people housed. The thing is that um, you're gonna need to make sure that the people who are doing the fidelity reviews understand everything it is that you're doing and why you're doing it that way. And also wanting to see if people wanted to live in your buildings. So there's some parameters for how you get a 4, how you get a 3, how you get a 2 or a 1 in housing integration. Housing integration, again, if you're working with private landlords, probably will not be that big of an issue. If you're providing your own housing and you only have one building, it's going to be a little bit more of an issue, but not the end of the world. Um, so any questions so far on those dimensions? Now I've just gone over 4 of the dimensions, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the 4 dimensions that I just went over. Or do you have any questions about how you score those units on those 4 dimensions? All right, I see some people understanding. If you don't understand, please speak up and don't be embarrassed to say that you don't understand. I'm sure you're not the only one who doesn't understand, because I sleep this stuff. I breathe it. I do it a lot. So when you understand it, it's very different um, when you're trying to explain it to somebody else. So rights of tenancy, easy one. One of the things that we want to see is everybody's um, lease, a copy of a signed lease. So for everybody who that you've worked with, you should have a copy of their lease in your file. And easy to ask for. And a lot of times I've had people come back because they lost their lease and were like, I don't know what was in my lease, or can you let me see my lease because I lost it and I need to see what's in there. I always had a copy of the lease. Um, and another part of rights of tenancy is making sure that the lease doesn't have any program information in it saying, well, you can only live in this building as long as you're participating in services. Now, if you have a few people that are in buildings where they have to be in compliance with the program, not a big deal as long as the tenants chose that. And when I say the tenants chose that, I mean that it's documented that the tenants chose that. And everybody knows why I'm saying documented, right? Because if it's not documented, then what? It didn't happen. Thank you, Eva. Yes, yes, Rachel. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. And that's the thing that a lot of times the staff get hung up on, because I'm reading a file and I got a person in front of me telling me that they did everything. They gave the person choice. But I look in the file and I can't find anything about choice. And there have been times that I've asked the staff person to come and show me, because they're telling me it happened. I'm like, show me where it happened in this file. Well, I didn't write it down, but it happened. You can ask the tenant. I could ask the tenant, but we don't. I'm not going to run around and ask all the tenants. So it is important that you do your job and document, and not leave things up to my imagination or somebody else's imagination. So then we have access to housing. Now remember, access to housing is not just about your program. It is about whoever you're working with, whoever's doing referrals to you. If you're getting referrals from within your agency from other programs, then part of what we're going to do in the Fidelity review is talk to the people who are doing the referrals. And what are we going to be asking those people who are doing the referrals? We want to know if they're referring anybody to your program that asks for housing. If they're not referring anybody who asks for housing to your program, and they're making the decision that this person is not quite ready, then that's going to take your score down. So the important thing for you to do is, whoever your partners are, to make sure that somebody is educating them from your team, to let them know that we do not want you making any type of decisions. We want anybody who says, I want housing, to be referred to our program. Do not make that decision. If they say, I want housing, send them to us. I know some programs, the way they've dealt with this is that people can ask people can come into their program two different ways. They can just walk in. If they're already a client with that agency, they can come into the housing department and ask for housing on their own. Or they can go through their case manager or their clinician or their doctor. um, but you want to have a way that people don't get prevented from coming to your program. And a lot of times the referring agencies will make decisions about who they refer and who they won't refer, because that's just how this industry works. And people are making decisions. Clinicians are like, well, this person's not med compliant, so I'm not going to refer them to this program until they learn to take their meds. Well, we don't want clinicians making that decision. We want clinicians to just refer the people to housing. And one of the things that we know will happen is, when people start to get set in their housing and start to, really understand that this is their housing, and as long as they follow the rules of their lease, they can stay there. Then we can start working with this person on other things. And we may get to working with people on taking their medication, if that's something they want to work with. But taking medication has never been a requirement for having your own housing. Because I would tell you, if it was a requirement, a lot of people would never have a place. I know lots of people who have been assigned medication and who do not take all their medication or don't take it like the doctor prescribed it, or they don't take it at all. And they're still maintaining their housing. So, taking medication is not, gonna be the difference between having housing and not having housing. Um, so we want to make sure that whoever's doing referrals to the programs are not stopping people from getting to your programs. And I know this doesn't sound fair. I've had other programs in other states that I've worked with that were saying, well, we told them to just send us anybody, but they, I don't know how to get them to stop making, stop um choosing who should be coming to me or who shouldn't be coming to me. And this is a thing that you need to go to. If the clinicians aren't sending you people and you've tried working with them and tried to get them to change, um, then you go to their supervisor and make this work. So I see I am running into this with HUD Vesh. Is this normal then? So at HUD Vesh, they're making choices about who can come into the program. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, see, that's a problem with HUD Vesh. If they're making decisions, if the decision is made based on whether or not the person is eligible, that's one thing. But if they're making this decision because they don't feel like this person is ready, then you need to have some more talks with them. And you may need to go up the food chain to let them know that they need to um, be referring people to you and not making that decision. So somebody on staff is going to have to go and educate them and keep educating them. Don't assume because you do it one time, you don't ever have to do it again. You keep doing it. You might do it. You might go to a meeting every 3 months to remind them that they need to just refer people over. Um, but don't just assume you did one training and everybody's going to get it. Um, Privacy, that again, the privacy part on here is basically saying that service staff should not be entering people's units unless they're invited. So if you're services, you should not be going into anybody's unit unless they invite you. Um, so this one again is about, services staying in their lane. My psychiatrist, my therapist, my clinician doesn't have a key to my house and doesn't come over to my house to check on me or to see if I'm doing all the things I said I would do. They don't get to do that. Service staff here don't get to do that. Service staff cannot go into somebody's unit unless they're invited. Unless there's an emergency and you go and the property manager opens the door and you're with the property manager. But if it's not an emergency, you should not be going into anybody's unit unless you're invited. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, it's one of those things that, it's respectful. It's if the clients know what the staff can and cannot do, they're making decisions. So when they make a bad decision, we can hold them accountable for a bad decision. And bad decisions are how they're going to learn. And so we need to just make sure that we're doing everything we can on our end to make people feel like this is their home and they have some control over it. The services, the services are the flexible voluntary services are not difficult, but they do require staff to think outside the box. You can't do services like you would normally do services. Because I know if you've worked in an office before and you've worked with people, you just have a group and you'll have a group on budgeting, and people have to come to that group. Well, more than likely, if I get into my own apartment, am I going to want to go to a budgeting class? Some people might want to, but a lot of times the people who need to go don't go. Why don't they go to a budgeting class? Because doesn't that sound fun? A budgeting class, woohoo! Don't you all want to do a budgeting class? I'm going to assume that not, well, okay, there's always the few people who, yeah, you are a dork, Lisbeth. I see some people say, no, no, nope. I wouldn't want to do a budgeting class. It would, because that's not how I do my budgeting. I've never written out a budget. So if you were saying to me, Pat, you need to have a budget in order to stay in this housing or keep this housing, I'm gonna be like, is do I have to? Budgeting classes are not required. We can do budgeting in very different ways. I'm gonna give you an example. I had somebody who ran out of money the first month they were in their apartment. They were on a fixed income and they had no money left. And they came to me asking me for food. I made some referrals to some places that could give them food. And I said to this person, I said, it's fine that you ran out of money. Um, have you thought about, are you having any problems with budgeting your money or making your money stretch through the month? And they were like, I don't get a lot of money. It is hard to make it stretch, blah, blah, blah. But budgeting, I don't want to do a budgeting. Budgeting doesn't work for me. I said, well, how about this? How about the next time you get your paycheck or your, not your paycheck, but your check, your monthly check? We'll go to the store together. Let's go to the store and maybe we can help you to make some choices that are going to stretch your money a little bit more. So I went to the store with this client, well, this tenant. We called our people tenants because they lived in apartments and we were there to get them housing. So I go to the store with this tenant. First, I get to his house and he's like, he was just assuming that we were going to take my car. And I said, no, we're not taking my car. We're going to go to the store the way you go to the store. How do you go to the store? And he was like, well, I have one of those buggies upstairs and I walk to the store. Okay, then that's how we're going to the store. Let's get your buggy and let's walk to the store. So we walk to the store and he's grumbling about why can't we take your car? And my answer is because it's my car and I'm not going to be taking you to the grocery store every time, and we need to make sure that the decisions that you're making are things you can do on your own without my help. Because my job was not only to help them get housing, it was to help them become independent of me. I didn't want people constantly being dependent on me. So we walked to the store. We got to the store and he started putting in, we skipped the whole fruit and vegetable aisles, did not touch that aisle. We went straight over. We went to, I think we went to the lunch meat and deli part. So he was getting, some luncheon meat and some cheese. And then we went over to the popcorn and chip aisle and he got a bunch of bags of that. And then we went over to the soda aisle and he started filling up on soda. And then he started putting these frozen meals in. And I basically looked at him and said, "You only have enough food in your cart for 2 weeks. And this has to get you through the entire month." Um, and then, I also, asked him about the frozen meals, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I never really knew how to cook. I don't know how to cook. And so I just throw a frozen meal in the microwave and that's what I eat." That's fine. Um, so then we went back and looked at the frozen meals and I started asking questions about dietary needs. And I knew that this client had some physical health issues. So I was bringing those up. Didn't your doctor say you need to start eating more fruit and vegetables? Well, yeah, he said that, but I don't like vegetables, and fruit's okay, but I can't eat a lot of fruit because my teeth are bad. And I thought, grapes, cherries, oranges, you can eat those things. So what I eventually found out was this person did not know how to cook and he was buying frozen meals and that's what he was eating, and each frozen meal was costing about $4 each. So you're on a fixed income, you're getting 100, and I think he was getting like $111 or something like that. That goes really quick when you're just buying frozen meals and chips and soda. So we talked about the frozen meals and we talked about, choices, and I asked him was cooking something he wanted to do. And he was like, "Well, I would love to learn how to cook a few things. It would be nice to know how to cook some stuff, but I've never been able to cook." Okay. Well, is that something you want to work on? Well, sure. I would love to work on that. Cooking is something that if I knew how to cook, I think I could eat better. Okay. And what about vegetables? And he was like, "I don't like vegetables. I don't know how to cook them. I've never liked them." And I said, "Well, what about if we can figure out a way to cook some vegetables that you like or that you try?" "Oh, I could try them. I don't know if we'll see." Then I asked, why are you drinking so much soda? Do you realize how many 2-liter bottles of soda you have that you're trying to purchase? And he started telling me about the fact that he was having a hard time staying awake and he drank the soda to stay awake. And the more we talked, I found out that the sleepiness was one of the side effects of some medication. So I said, instead of drinking all of this soda, maybe we should talk to your doctor about this medication, and maybe there's a way to change this medication or at least talk to the doctor about the side effect, because drinking all this soda is not good for your teeth, which is one of the things that you're just talking about. You're not able to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables because of your teeth. We can work on that. I also in this store visit talked about the difference between name brands and generic brands in the store, and how he didn't have to buy all of the brand name foods. So, if that was my store visit. So I just told you all the things I did. When I get back to my office, what am I going to write in my file of what I did with this person? What have I covered in this one trip to the grocery store? Life skills, absolutely. Budgeting, dietary needs, yep. Learning to cook, goal setting, hmm critical thinking, absolutely. I covered a lot in that one grocery store visit. Documentation about meds, absolutely. I when you do that, things for him to follow up with his doc about his meds, absolutely. Motivational stuff, yes. I did a lot. So when I got back to the office, I wrote all of that up. And the next time I met with him, we started mapping out some goals based on that store visit. So I started asking him, what were some of the things he wanted to work on first. I was able to find somebody, and this was before COVID, and hopefully, COVID will be gone soon, or at least we'll have a way to cope with it. But I found somebody who was willing to come to one of our buildings and do cooking classes for people. And so, she was like, she could handle 4 or 5 people at a time. She was willing to do some cooking classes. And I asked her if she could do cooking classes and healthy eating and teaching people how to, use some healthy items in their food. I started some cooking classes. That was not something I had planned on doing. I don't think people need to know how to cook in order to live in their own place, but it was one of the things that this person wanted. And I figured if this person wanted it, I maybe had some other tenants who wanted to learn how to cook. Um, so yeah, so connecting the tenants with a peer group that can also model life skills. Absolutely. And just asking questions and listening was what I did at the grocery store. I also found out we needed to, at some point, he needed to probably see a dentist. But I was going to put that on the back burner because I don't want to push people to work on more goals than they're ready to work on. But there was a lot there. And that was how I determined what goals some of the goals that we could work on together. It wasn't by me coming in and saying, here's a list of things I can do, or everybody who comes into this program has to have a budgeting class, they have to have a cooking class, they have to have some life skill classes. It was not a one size fits all. And one of the main reasons you have to have a small caseload is because this work takes time. It took me and him a good 3 hours at the grocery store, like walking to the grocery store, coming back from the grocery store. Um, that was a good 3 hours of my day. If I had a huge caseload, there is no way I would be able to do something like that. And those are the kind of things that we need to be doing to make this work, is to get out there and get to know our people outside of paperwork. I didn't have any papers with me when we went to the grocery store. If you saw us in the grocery store, you would have never known that I was, you know, the staff, his service staff person. We would have looked just like a couple of people at the grocery store. But it was one of the ways that I could figure out what needed to happen and and also deal with some of the issues that were coming up because he ran out of money. And I kept thinking, if he's running out of money every month, we're going to be doing this dance every month trying to rush to find him food, that because he's not doing a good enough job with the money he has. So that's how I approach the flexible voluntary services. I don't have a set of, different things that people have to have. I try to see what it is that people need. And then if I see items that I think other tenants might enjoy, I will, you know, make a small group, not a big group, but a small group that can do some of that. Um, I also as part of my job as working with people, I've had to go into people's houses and help them clean, model how to clean your apartment, show people how to clean their apartment. I've had to show people what products to use to clean. I've had to show people, especially if they didn't have the skill sets. That was part of my job, was to talk about those daily living skills. If a person was, didn't have a good odor, I've had people who, you know, their next door neighbors complain about the odor that's coming from their room. I've had to have those conversations with people. It's wherever the person's at. That's where you start. And you start off with doing some of the things that the person has identified, or identify our issues that they want to work on. And the only way you get them to identify those issues is to talk. So those are the 7 dimensions. Was that helpful to go through that again? Good. All right. So I'm gonna skip through some of these ones on these um things about the scoring, because you got the scoring, or at least you have an idea of the scoring. So this slide starts to um take us to the next step. What if the client starts to expect you to clean for them every week and doesn't really engage in helping? Oh, no, 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 no. They have to engage in helping, because I don't go in and do the cleaning. I show them how to do it, and then I hand them the items and say, now you do it. And then we do it together. And then the next time I will say, well, I'll come back in a week and see how the place is looking and see what you need to work on, and then we'll get that done. And the next week I go in, I say stuff like, remember what we used to clean that with? What did we use? And they'll tell that, hopefully they'll remember and tell me, and I'll say, okay, so those are things that you need to do. And sometimes I'll help make a list for people. These are things you need to do every day, and these are some of the things you need to do weekly. It depends on where the person's at, and what their skill sets are and where they're at as far as their skill sets. I've had some people, I made a written list and just, put it into um one of those things to cover it so that the paper wouldn't get damaged, and they attached it to their fridge so they could remember their schedule of when things needed to be done. I've had to tell some people that every day you should wash your dishes and not leave dirty dishes sitting in the sink every day, all day. Um, that would be one of those things you should be doing on a regular basis, is washing the dishes. Um, so no, you're never going to go in and do the work for people. You're going to do it with them. And your job is to teach, not to do. Teach. And then come back the next time and then have them show you. If they can't remember, I would say, well, let's start off with remembering the products. One person I worked with could not, I figured out somewhere along the way that he couldn't read and write. And so I basically put photographs or pictures for all the things he needed to do, along with the product. Like one of the products that he was going to be cleaning with was Comet. So I would put Comet, a picture of the can of Comet, and I would put what he should use it on. And so he would use the Comet on pots and pans and to clean out the stove. And so I would put the a picture of the Comet cleaner and the stove and pots and pans, and that was the picture. So he knew which one to use the Comet on. But I got to know this because I got to know this person and know that he was really forgetting or confused about what he should use. And I learned that, you don't assume anything. You don't assume that people know how to clean. You don't assume they know how to cook. But you don't assume that they need to know all those things. They need to know some basics to keep their apartment in decent shape, but they don't need to know everything in order to keep their place. But I'll tell you one thing that has always helped me. If you, the staff person, are working harder than the client, there's a problem. Because who wants it? If a client wants something, they'll work to get it. And if you're working harder than the person doesn't want it. So, you know, I always keep that in the back of my head. And that way I don't go in and, because a lot of times it would be easier for me to just go into a tenant's apartment and just clean it. Especially, it's not a huge apartment and sometimes it's not that bad. It would be easier to just do it, but that's not going to help anybody. So my job is to teach people and to help them learn how to do it, not to make them dependent on me. And so you have to remember as service people that your job is to teach, not to enable. If you have everybody dependent on you, then of course you could come clean my house. I would let you. You can clean my house, you can wash my dishes. I'll let you do everything. That's not our job, people. Our job is to teach people. We're trying to make them independent. We're trying to make them not depend on us. So when you're getting to the scoring, some of the things you're looking for is policies and procedures. If an agency has policies and procedures, you want to see those because the policies and procedures will give you some idea of what the agency deems as important. We also do interviews with we do interviews with the clients, with the staff and leadership and your partners. We also review files and documentation. We look in the files for the HQS inspections. We look for the lease agreements. We look for types of housing. We look for location of housing. All of that is we usually find that information in the file. I'm gonna show you what we have a form for the a form that will cover what you look for in a in the file. So there is a list of documentation. Oops, that's not it. Let me find that form. Uh, uh, I know it's here somewhere. Uh, I might have to go back to it. Um, let me find that form. It's not a complex form, but it's a form that will um let's see if this is it or if this is the wrong one. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's for employment. We're not gonna use that one. We're gonna go to let's see. Um ah this one. So when you're doing a fidelity review, here are the things that you're looking for in a file. So so each time you look at a file when you're doing a fidelity review, this is the form that you'll fill out to do each file. So you put the client's initials. We don't need to know clients' names. We just need to know the initials of the client so we can at least keep that part straight. The reviewer puts in their name. We put in whether or not this is a permanent supportive housing client. Um, we look at whether or not what's the client status. Are we in the engagement part? Are we in the assessment part? Are we doing a housing search? Or is the person in housing or maintaining housing? On the other side, we put in which housing specialist file is this. We want to know who that staff person is. We put in the agency name. And if you look at this form, we go into, the housing assessment. Is it a standardized assessment? Is it timely, comprehensive, updated annually? So we're looking at the assessment and then we're looking at, is this assessment done? Is there a standard way to do it? Is it a time process? Is it comprehensive? Does it have everything in it that needs to be in it? And then you can put some notes. We look at the housing preference. Did the person get to choose their housing? When were they referred? When was the first time you contacted the person? When was the first time you went through and did a profile with the person? And do you update that profile every time the person makes a change? We look at whether or not there's a housing plan. So when the person comes to you, do you develop a plan with them around the housing? And is that documented? Um, and then you see documentation indicates discussion with the client about type of housing, desired, choice of unit, and composition of household. So we want to see where is this documented. We want to see whether or not the person had some help or was offered help or assistance with understanding their benefits. People need to understand their benefits and how their benefits will be affected. And we need to make sure we're referring people out for that, or if we have somebody in-house, that they're able to see this person to learn about their benefit planning. We want to see if the housing specialists document the housing search and contacts with the landlord. Um, we want to see whether or not um, the housing specialist makes or recommends housing contacts based on the consumer's stated preferences. Um, we want to make sure that the housing specialist help the consumer with finding housing. It is not, you are not being a housing specialist if people come to you for housing and you give them a sheet of paper with some places listed on it and you tell them to go find their place. That is not what you're supposed to be doing. That is not the job of the housing specialist. Now, when I say, they need to work as hard as we do, but that means we need to work. That means our job is not just giving them a file or looking on the computer and seeing what housing is available and telling them to go look at it. Depending on where the person is at, I may have a person, depending on their skill sets. I've had some people do half the work and I do half the work. I've had some people that weren't able to do half. And so I gave, they would take less work. I had one person that was really struggling and all his job was to do was to try to, if he saw something, write it down because he was so terrified of talking to anybody. He would just write down information and bring it back. Like if he saw a place that looked interesting when he was out walking around, his job was to write down the address of the place and the phone number if there was a phone number. And I would follow up with the people. So the amount of work that we give the client, it should be really based on what the client can do and cannot do. Um, One of the things we start also talking about is housing retention. Once a person gets housing, your job is not over. For some people, the job gets tougher because now we got to help this person maintain the housing. So we also want to see documentation of what you're doing to help this person maintain the housing. How often are you meeting with them? Is there a plan? Are they working on some goals? What type of supports are you providing? Um, and so this part of the document gets filled out. And then we have a housing loss because no matter what you do, sometimes it's just not going to work out. But we don't leave people behind. We don't let them go. We continue to work with people. So if they lost the housing, the housing specialist should know about it and should be starting to work on trying to find some more housing. The thing is, you don't want people to get evicted. You want to work with them before they get evicted. And if they're on the verge of being evicted, it might be a time to cut our loss and have the person move into a different place where and so they won't have an eviction on their record. Because if you have an eviction, it's going to be harder to find that next unit. So my advice would be everybody that we need to know sooner than later if people are having struggles in their apartments, and then we need to work on those and not wait until the person's being evicted or about to be evicted. And then we have some more stuff on here about assertive engagement and outreach. Now, this form is for the staff who are doing the fidelity review, but I see this as also being useful for people who are doing their own housing or for people who are doing housing in the community. So I show you that because there are no secrets to this. There are no secrets in what the expectations are. I'm gonna suggest we take a break, a 15-minute break, and I have for time. Oh, will that form? Every form that I've talked about, you're either gonna get the form, or we're gonna give you a link to the form, a place where you can find the form. So you're gonna get lots of information, either later today or tomorrow. I will make sure you get it. Um, so let's take a 15-minute break. It is 10:30 your time, so we'll be back at 10:45. Go stretch out and do what you need to do. All right, everybody. Are we good? Hopefully, you had a good break. We may finish a little early today, depending. Um, so I'm not about holding you here if you don't need to be here. So, one of the important parts of doing a fidelity review is interviewing. Why do you think interviewing would be important? Anybody have any ideas why more heads? Let's see. Learning about what they're wanting. This, yeah, and this is part of the fidelity. It's different perspectives. Um, it is how we know what the client needs and wants. But why would we, what in the fidelity review, why would we want to interview different people on the team? Like so let me just go through who all gets interviewed when you're doing a fidelity review. We interview some of the clients. We interview the peer specialist. We interview the housing specialist. We interview the person who is in charge of that program. Sometimes, depending on the structure of the agency, we'll interview the person in charge of the person who is over the program. Sometimes we interview the executive directors or the lead people. We also interview some of the people who are making referrals to the agency. And if possible, we may interview one or two landlords. So these interviews that we do are crucial because when we're doing a fidelity review, it's kind of hard. We're looking at a ton of information and we don't always know whether or not the issue that an agency is having, sometimes that issue can be a staff issue. To get a idea of the how the program agency operates, get a feel for the atmosphere, how the program is run. Absolutely. We're trying to get a sense of that, um, to educate them, to help them make the changes that are needed. Absolutely. We're trying to get a sense of this program. Sometimes programs might have a different issue going on. For instance, sometimes it could be that you have one slacker on your team who is not doing everything they need to do. We don't want to give the entire agency a critique if we can figure out if it's one staff person. So we may come back and say that this was a staff issue, or this staff person maybe wasn't trained well, or this staff person doesn't understand what they're supposed to be doing. Um, it could be a management. I've had one place where I went to do the interviews, and the the supervisor of the programs was not good. And that came out because every time I was asking questions, I was getting the same information from all of the staff. And we figured out that it was a supervisor issue. It wasn't necessarily the staff, it was the supervisor didn't know what they were doing. So they weren't able to really supervise the staff to get them to do what they were supposed to do. So we like to talk to people. Um, and I'm gonna do something as soon as I'm gonna try to figure out how to do this. Um, I'm gonna go to one of the supervisor's questions because we always have interview forms for all of the supervisors. This is the program manager, program director one. I think I'm going to do the housing specialist. Now, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. I'm going to be the person doing the fidelity review, and I want to interview one of you. And you can either talk about your current program, or you can make up a fictitious a program that you're not working in. I will leave it up to you, but I just want to give everybody a sense of how the interviews go. And usually in a group setting, I would break you up into groups and have you all interviewing each other, and I will be walking around listening in and making sure you all know how to do it. Um, but I don't have that luxury. So I'm hoping for a brave soul to want to do this with me. Any takers? All right, Tim, I'm gonna take you off of mute as soon as I find your name on the list. Oh, you self muted. Can you unmute your line, Tim? I can unmute you on my side, but it says it's saying that you're self muted.
How's
All
that?
right, are you there?
I am,
Oh, thanks, Tim. Thanks for doing this.
of course.
So, my name is Pat Tucker, and I'm with a group called Advocates for Human Potential. And we're doing interviews. We're actually doing a fidelity review of your program. I'm sure your supervisors told you about this. Um, but what we're trying to do in this with this fidelity review is trying to see where your agency is at with doing this evidence-based practice. And what we'll end up doing is providing some feedback on the things that you're doing well and some places that you may not be doing so well. And so the goal of this is continuous improvement. So there are no really wrong answers. What we're trying to do is just get a sense of where the program is at and trying to help you move to the next step. Any questions for me?
I don't believe so, thanks.
Okay. So let me just start off with asking you if you can describe the implementation of permanent supportive housing within your organization.
We start with the coordinated entry process which brings a client into the building, and then they're directed to whichever program would suit them best.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my programs is the HEN program, Housing Essential Needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would work with me to determine if we're able to bring them onto the program and then support them moving forward.
Excellent. So in your role, do you ever work with the clinical or case management staff?
We manage, we, as a client advocate, we manage our individual clients, but not with any sort of medical staff.
Okay. So you don't deal with medical staff at all?
Correct. We would
Okay.
refer them to one of our partners in the community.
Okay. And so when you refer them to one of the agencies in your area, um, how do you know if the person is getting the right services that they need?
It, it's through, certainly conversation at the
Mhm.
beginning of the intake when we bring them on. They're signing the release of information. And so we just keep an open line of communication with the varying agency. And so I would have no issue calling up and speaking to the case manager that they're working with at that agency. And then I
Okay.
would just simply update the notes within their case management file in my building.
Okay. How many people do you have on your caseload?
On this particular program, I think I have 21 active clients.
21 active clients. Wow. Um, and in implement, so how long has your agency been doing permanent supportive housing?
We started about 52 years ago, and
Wow.
our philosophy is housing first. So housing is kind of the number one priority within the building.
Okay, so you guys own your own housing.
We do have approximately 300 units in town in the county, but we
Okay.
also work with numerous apartment complexes as well as individual landlords.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So you said most of your people come through the coordinated entry. Um, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So in this last year, out of your caseload, you said you had 21 people.
Yes.
How many of those people have moved into their own place?
Within the last 12 months,
Yes, within the
I
last
would
12 months.
say, without looking at the dates, I would say probably 10 to 12, so nearly half.
Okay.
But if a client moves to this program is supported by DSHS, and they literally will tell me if the client is eligible or not. And so
Okay.
once they're working with DSHS, if they are no longer uh, approved through this program, we move them out of this program and potentially into another. But oftentimes it means that they are able to sustain and pay for their own rent moving forward.
Oh, that's good. So, have you encountered any barriers in trying to do permanent supportive housing?
Well, of course, some of, most of our clients that come into the building are homeless in some form. And so some, maybe it was they lost their job 3 months ago. And so it's been just a little bit of time for them. So
Mm-hmm.
smaller barriers because they've been able to relatively recently been able to manage their own housing.
Okay.
Others come into us that have been, living on the streets for 1, 2, even 3 years. And just, we kind of have to hold their hand and teach them from step one how they manage their household. And so that's a client that'll be with us a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly barriers come into play.
Absolutely. Have you encountered any barriers working with your partners in the community or any issues working with your partners?
The I think with my organization being around as long as it has, we're quite well known in the community. And so we typically, at least from my experience, I obviously can't speak for the whole building, but from my experience working with the partners in the community, everybody is wanting the same outcome, and that's to help. And so I
Mm-hmm.
personally haven't encountered any barriers from partners. They'll come to me with a referral and where I go to them with one, and it just seems to be a great relationship.
Okay, that's good. Um, in your opinion, what do you think, or what would it take to make this permanent supportive housing initiative more successful? I mean, I know you guys have been doing housing for a long time, and you've been doing housing first. Um, but just thinking about the permanent supportive housing, is there anything that can change to make this more successful for you, or do you guys feel like it's already successful?
Well, I think what we're doing and what doing within our four walls, we're pretty successful, and the amount of people that we're able to help over a year's time,
Mm-hmm.
is great. Can we do more? Absolutely. And honestly, that all comes down to money. The program I manage, my boss has challenged me to spend as close to the full grant amount as possible. And I
Mm-hmm.
think through the end of the grant year, which is June, I'm currently at a negative $52. So he's like, wow, you are really managing that well. So uh,
Yeah, you're
we,
doing
we
a
want to
great job.
spend, yeah, we want to spend every dollar that we can get. And unfortunately, we need more. I think everybody on this call needs more.
Oh, absolutely. I remember doing programs and thinking, we could do so much more with more money. Um, but it sounds like you guys are doing a great job with what you already have, which is good to
Thank
hear.
you. Yeah.
Um, so let's talk a little bit about housing options. So how do you offer choice? So I walk into your agency, I've been referred, I walk in. What's the process? I mean, do you sit me down and start asking me about what do I want in types of housing, or how does that tell me how that process works?
So I remember you talking about this on Tuesday. And initially, what I thought is, gosh, I don't ever really give anybody an option. But then I was putting thought into it, and we do give them an option to an extent, because very much like you've been saying, we're not here to do, we're here to help. And
Mm-hmm.
so I consistently give them, we work with a list of landlords, a list of apartment complexes in the community. And so we give them a housing packet at that point and say, start looking. And we give them a budget because my program only allows a certain amount per unit. And
Mm-hmm.
I only work with single adults. I don't work with families.
Okay.
And so I say, here's how much you have to spend. When you find one or two that you're interested in, let's fill out the application. And if they need help with the filling out the application or with, paying for the background check, we're here to help with that. But
Mm-hmm.
we do let them choose based on what's out there. Now, the amount of money that my grant pays is not the lowest amount of rent in town, certainly
Mm-hmm.
not the highest rent. So they have a reasonable selection, but they ultimately get to choose where they want to be.
So you said they have but they don't. You don't put all the options on the table. You put the options on the table that are available now. That, am I
Correct.
understanding correct?
You are, but we will also say, hey, check Facebook Marketplace, check Craigslist, go on to any rental website or rental app. And we
Mm-hmm.
encourage them to look as much as they can, and ultimately, again, we're not here to make the decision for them. We're here
Right.
to support them. So I don't say, okay, I'm moving you into this unit. That's not my choice to make.
Okay. And what if the person doesn't doesn't know how to navigate the internet or to go to these sites that you're saying? What then? How do you? I mean, if I don't know how to get to Facebook or go to look on Craigslist, or I don't have the ability to do that, how can I look for different options?
Well, if I'm your client advocate, you're in a good position because I truly care about people. And so if I need to take my own personal time to sit down and hold your hand and walk you through the process, that's what I'm going to do. And that
Mm,
can be through either a Zoom meeting. We have client offices within our building if they want to come in. We
mhm.
just both have to be on a mask. But in this building, again, with our housing first philosophy, we're going to do everything we can to help them make that choice.
Oh, okay. Excellent. Let's talk about, so if I'm coming to your place and I see all of these places that are available, but I don't like any of them. Can I turn down all of those options without losing my place in line as a client?
You absolutely but being honest with you, the the clients that are coming to me needing help, like I said, may have been homeless for a week, may have been
Mm-hmm.
homeless for 2 years. And I haven't encountered one in my role that has been, they're always so excited to be able to hear those words, yes, you're approved. And
Mm-hmm.
so I haven't had anyone say, no, I don't want to live here because we
Okay.
wouldn't apply if they weren't at a point where they wanted to live there.
Okay.
Now, let's say they found a place, they applied and they were turned down,
Mm-hmm.
then we just keep looking. I wouldn't say, sorry, we can't help.
Right.
That's just one of those barriers we have to work with. And so we just keep looking. And then if we have to find a different landlord that has a little more flexibility with barriers, then that's the route we'll take.
Okay. And I believe earlier you said that you only worked with single people. Um, so what happens if I have a boyfriend or girlfriend that I want to live with me?
The if on that initial coordinated entry, if you're both entered into the system, then you would go into a different program. We have programs for couples and families. My
Okay.
particular program is for single. Now,
Ah.
after that question, let's say we find you a place to live and you want a significant other to move in with you. As long as they're not on the lease, they're just going to share the house with you. That's
Mm-hmm.
not something that we care about within the walls, as long as the apartment complex is comfortable with you having a second tenant in the place.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna stop it here because I think we've done enough for everybody to have a sense. Thank you, Tim, for doing this. That was great of you to do that. I appreciate it.
No problem, thanks.
All right. So, as you can hear, that's kind of how it goes. And this list of questions keeps going. We touch on all of the dimensions in this. And we are asking questions of, so we would be asking questions of Tim, we would be asking questions of all the other housing specialists, and we would be asking them the same questions. Why do you think it's important to ask all of the staff on the team the questions, the same questions? Why couldn't we just interview one person and be done with it? To see if we're on the same page? Absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I've been to agencies and one person says something, and then you turn to the next housing specialist and you have no clue that they both work for the same agency because the answers are so different. How do you, as a reviewer, how would you deal with that? Say you gotta figure out how you're gonna score this agency. And you've interviewed the two housing specialists and they both gave you different information. What do you do? You would probably lower their score. Maybe. I think lowering their score would depend um on what it is that they're why the scores are or what are they doing. If they're doing different things, then the scores may be reduced because one person may not be doing what they need to do. It might be a chance for some re-education. Maybe one of the staff people don't really know what it is that they're doing. So it could be that, maybe one person really paid attention in the training and the other one didn't pay attention. Um, it could be it could be that one of the staff just really wants to do their own thing. And so what would be written in the reviews is that the two housing specialists are not on the same page. Um, and we may recommend that the housing specialists need more training, or need a review of the materials to make sure that they're on the same score or on the same page. But sometimes it's not an issue for the program, it's a staffing issue. And so that's why we interview all of the different staff. Um, and I have i- done fidelity reviews and interviewed three housing specialists and got three different pictures and not sure which one is the right picture. And so my recommendation was that all of the staff needed to be they needed a review, and they need supervision needed to be stronger for that team so that they all were doing the same thing because they were doing different things and they all had found things that worked for them. um and some of the ideas were great, but it was only this one person who was doing it. And I was basically saying to them that you need to be talking to each other and these things should be coming up in your meetings. And some of the ideas that staff had were worth implementing. And so, letting the supervisors know you should be talking to the staff. They have some great ideas. Let's try to incorporate those into what you're doing. So that's one of the reasons why we like to interview all of the staff, because everybody's, comes in and we all come in with our own experiences, right? We don't always have the same experience. And sometimes, no matter how much you train people, some people are going to want to do it from their way and not, what they're being told to do. Again, I put a loose screenshot of the score sheet. This is what we've already gone over. So I'm not going to beat that horse to death. Not gonna, and this is just more information I had just thrown in here. Now, if you decided to do fidelity reviews, usually there is a team of people who do fidelity reviews. And one of the reasons why we have a team of people doing fidelity reviews is because we all see things differently. We don't always see the same thing. Look at this picture and tell me how many people do you see? Take your time and write it in the box. How many people do you see? Everybody's carefully counting. Any answers yet of how many people you're seeing in that tree? I'm assuming that that you do see people in the tree. Anybody see six people in the tree? I see at least 11 people in that tree. Anybody see 10 people in that tree? No? Did I lose you all? Are you still counting? All right. So the number of people you see in that tree, I would be willing to bet we're all going to have different answers depending on how we're looking at it. I've seen this picture, I don't know how many times, and each time I find another person that I didn't see before. The reason we have this up here and the reason we like to do team interviews or team fidelity reviews is because we're all going to see things differently. Some of us are going to see, the main people and not necessarily the secondary people. Some of us are going to see only a few people. Some of us are going to see everything or all the people, but then we have to put all that information together. So all of the fidelity reviews that are completed are done as a team. So if you chose to become a fidelity reviewer, you would be on a team of people. It would not just be you. This team of people would be led by the experts in Washington State on doing fidelity reviews for permanent supportive housing. You will either have um, Kimberly Castle or Amanda Polly. And some of you who are doing, if you're doing the Bridges program, may have Wanda. But those are the people who will be the team leads. And then there will be, it could be 3 to 4 different other people who've been through this training working as a team with them. So you always will have an expert at the table with you because we don't expect everybody to go through this training and then be able to do a fidelity review. So it will be done as a team. Each person will get to do all the parts. So everybody will get to do an interview. Everybody will get to look at the files. Everybody who wants to can read policies and procedures. All of that is going to lead to us coming up with the score. So let me just go through what the what the fidelity will review consist of. So you get an agenda. Whoever is doing the review will send out an agenda to the lead people at the agency. We will talk about the information we need to see that will be in the letter. We'll also talk about scheduling interviews for all of the people we need to see and talk to. We also like to observe a meeting, a team, a housing team meeting. We like to be able to observe that and see how that's going. Ideally, if possible, we like to see um, the housing specialist interacting with the property manager. And once we finish all of this process, which can take a couple of days in some cases, the team sits down together with all of their paperwork and all of their notes, and they together come up with scoring for this agency. And it has to be consistent scoring. So if somebody's saying, I think that's a 3, and somebody else thinks it's a 2, the team will have to sit down and look at and talk it out and figure out what's the score for that agency. And a lot of times that's looking back at those scoring sheets that I showed you to make sure that they're consistent with those score sheets. And then the agency they will have a score. So now you're on this Fidelity team. What the next thing they're going to say after you have scores for everybody is we need to split up how we're going to write the report. Everybody has to help write a report. So that means that everything that does not have a score of 4 has to have a recommendation. And that recommendation is about what that program needs to do to bring their score up to a 4. And so if you don't get a score of 4 in an area, there should be a recommendation. And that recommendation will say stuff like need to do a better job of documenting. The documentation is not strong. We see that you're doing a lot of great stuff, but somehow the team is not writing down all of the great work that you're doing. And so we think there's a documentation issue. Another issue that it could be is a training issue. Another issue could be that your partners aren't holding up their end and doing and just referring everybody to you. And we might recommend that you retrain the staff that are coming from your referring agencies, or you may need to go in there again and make sure they understand what it is that you're trying to do. Or if there are a couple of your referrals that are not working, then you may want to go in there and talk to them or talk to their supervisors and try to make that work. So then we give you all of these recommendations in a final report. And then the team will ask you to develop an action plan to show how you're going to improve some of the scores. You don't have to improve all of the scores all at one time. You can make a choice to improve, you can try to improve a couple of scores if you have a couple of scores that need improving. We One of the things that when we're doing the fidelity review, the people who are doing the fidelity review are going to be doing these interviews. There needs to be time for chart reviews, interviews with participants. We want to observe landlord outreach. Um, and we also want to interview landlords and property managers, make time for the consensus scoring, and make time for the recommendations. So we're gonna do we like to ask for certain information up front. So if you have that spreadsheet that I showed you on Monday, and it was uh, an Excel spreadsheet that you're all gonna get a copy of. You If you have one of those, we might ask you to send us that up front. Just block out or black out the names of people, or erase the row with the names of people. We don't need to see the names of people. We just need to see that, where they're living and how much they're paying for rent. Um, we would like to see the types of housing people are in. So whatever documentation people can bring to the table early on, that's what we want to see. One of the things that I will let you know is we expect all of the Fidelity reviewers to not make faces when people are answering questions or you're looking at somebody's program. You may think something is outrageous and you don't agree with it. Keep that to yourself. That is not something we want to be doing while we're sitting there. We also don't want to start giving recommendations in the review. I think the recommendations are best when you can write them all down and you've had chance to talk with the entire team, and you can have a chance to write down all of your comments as a team. It gets a little dicey if one person's giving feedback and the team hasn't had a chance to discuss. Um, we we always um like to look at, you know, making sure that we're doing everything we can. Um and I think we ask a lot of questions, but we're asking a lot of questions because we want to make sure we're giving you accurate information and not giving you information that's not accurate, or that we don't understand what's going on. Um, on this sheet, you have, so if you're on the eastern side of the state, your person that you're working with is Amanda Polly. If you're on the west side of the state, you have Kimberly Castle, and there's their contact information, so you can feel free to contact them. Um, I would contact Amanda if you haven't gotten all of the resources I promised you, because what I'm going to do is make sure she has all of the resources to send out to all of you so that you all can sit down and go through this again and feel like you got all the things that you were promised. And I'm taking questions. Any questions, any thoughts, anybody interested in doing or being a Fidelity reviewer? Are you all there? Any questions, any thoughts? Anybody willing or thinking about becoming a Fidelity reviewer? Or are you all thinking? See, if you're not answering, I'll just will keep talking because I don't know if you're hearing me. Um, so I'll just keep rambling on here, not knowing whether you're still there or whether you're hearing my questions, or are you thinking about things? Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? Anybody willing to be a Fidelity reviewer? I'm not hearing anything. I'm not seeing any notes in the box. Well, thank you everybody for attending. It's been a pleasure meeting with you, and I hope that you all have a great day. I'm giving you a reward of about 28 minutes. So you get to have 28 minutes to do some stuff you need to get done. Thanks everybody for attending. Bye bye.